Hey Dragonfly Swarm. So Genshin Impact 2.1 has brought about a lot of changes as to who I consider the strongest characters, a lot of it having to do with the new Archon character Raiden Shogun, and a lot more having to do with patch note changes. So in this video, and in relatively no particular order, I'm gonna discuss some of the best characters you can use in 2.1, talking a bit about why they work so well, and so on and so forth. If this video helps you in any way, leaving a like would be hugely appreciated, as it helps with the whole algorithm thing. I do want to say really quickly that this video only contains characters that have actually been impacted by the 2.1 changes. I could sit here all day and talk about why Ganyu and Zhongli are top tiers, but they're always top tiers. And nothing drastic about their playstyles and builds have changed. So if you don't see them in this video, I'm not saying they're not top tier, I'm just saving you time. The first character I want to talk about is Eula, because she's kind of in an interesting spot. She's always been a meta breaker in that she has a super weird playstyle that only really works for her. She's able to take physical damage to a whole new level, but since 2.0 Genshin Impact, she's been phased out a little bit, given all the new Spiral Abyss changes that were heavily weighted against her. However, with the release of the Raiden Shogun, she has once again found her way into the spotlight, because Eula and Raiden have ungodly amounts of synergy together, and can utilize each other's kits to deal massive and consistent damage on the field, regardless of an enemy's physical resistance. Not to mention, she's actually quite free-to-play friendly, given that her best in slot 4-star weapon, the Snow Tomb Star Silver, comes entirely free in the form of a puzzle reward in Dragon Spine. And on the other hand, if you wailed for her and aren't free-to-play, her damage ceiling is insanely high and only gets higher as you invest in her. It's good to see her back on the top picks with Raiden's release, considering how well Raiden complements her. And in that regard, the second character I want to discuss is the Raiden Shogun, a very controversial character. I think her strengths lie in the fact that she's able to fit extremely well with niche characters such as Eula, Yoimiya, and Child, and her kit allows her to significantly increase the overall damage output of these characters and similar teams. She acts as an amazing battery while simultaneously buffing her team's bursts. Then when her team is out of a rotation, she herself becomes a main DPS with her burst for 7 seconds, recharging the entire team's energy while doing so. She has a lot going on, and she's essentially a steroid pill for fast-paced teams, giving them much more rotation speed, burst damage, and of course, energy recharge. However, that doesn't exempt her flaws, and I do want to discuss that really quickly. As strong as she is, her element is still a hindrance if you take into account Electro's weaknesses, so there are teams that she really doesn't fit on, but the thing is, the teams she does fit on, she fits on so well that it's kinda scary. Now I want to talk about a certain buff, or rather a nerf, that has really revived a set of characters. In case you didn't know, crowd control characters were really weak in 2.0 since the new Nobushi and Kairagi enemies in the Spiral Abyss were pretty much immune to CC. However, their weight was nerfed in 2.1, finally making them susceptible to crowd control, which brought back some characters and made others that were still viable even stronger. For example, Kazuha. Kazuha is a character that wasn't too badly affected by the introduction of Kairagi enemies because a lot of his utility comes in the form of massive elemental mastery / damage boosts for his team, as well as the viridescent defense shred. As such, ever since his release nearly 4 months ago, he's remained a popular pick in the meta and for casual players considering how fun he is to play. But even so, now that the Kairagi are susceptible to crowd control, he's just that much more effective. And if I'm honest, I don't think Kazuha will ever fall off the top of the tier list, just because of the sheer amount of utility he brings to his team. And the only way to really nerf that is to nerf his numbers specifically, which I don't think miHoYo will do given the potential massive popularity of his rerun. Another character in a similar situation as Kazuha, and my next pick for the best characters in 2.1, is Sucrose. For similar reasons, Sucrose wasn't too terribly affected by the Kairagi introduction, given her multiple forms of utility such as elemental mastery boosting, defense shredding, and surprisingly high damage output from her skill and her burst. She's a solid pick and has been for a long time, and it's especially surprising when you take into account that she's only a 4-star, making her more obtainable than other picks as well as easier to build and invest in overall, given her massive free-to-play value. And speaking of free-to-play, let's next talk about one of the most insane free-to-play characters in the game, Xiangling. Xiangling on her own is insane as a pyro support / sub DPS, but when you take into account her constellations, her many viable artifact sets, and her wide variety of viable weapons, she's a free-to-play dream. And with the introduction of the Catch and the Emblem of Severed Fate artifact set, there's a totally new, completely free-to-play way to build her that turns her into a burst machine of flaming, spinny death. It's insane how much damage you can get out of her burst with this new build, and she holds up extremely well in the Spiral Abyss, given the emphasis on pyro damage and reaction damage, which she specializes in. Another of the god tier 4-stars I want to talk about is Xingqiu, and I know he's commonly brought up in tier lists, so everyone and their mother already knows he's a must-have, but there's new things that I want to talk about in terms of builds for 2.1 that somehow make him even stronger. For starters, the Emblem of Severed Fate set is insane on him, as it allows him to build energy recharge to maximize his burst uptime, and at the same time, the burst damage boost from the set affects all of his Guhua swords, giving him a massive damage output increase overall. On top of this, if you pair him with Raiden, his burst damage is increased even further by another 21% at level 6 Raiden skill, which is huge. This makes Raiden a pretty insane character to bring in the national team with Xingqiu, Xiangling, and Bennett, given the synergy, fast rotations, and as I said, massive burst damage multipliers for characters like Xingqiu. But yeah, that's pretty much the most major shifts and best characters to use in 2.1. 1.1, and a large amount of it has to do with Raiden's addition to the game, as well as a few patch note changes, but overall, this meta focuses quite heavily on fast-paced gameplay with quick rotations and massive burst damage, which in my opinion is quite fun to see. If you want more content and updates like these, feel free to subscribe and/or join my Discord server, or follow me on Twitch. All those links are down below, as usual. So I'm gonna go Steam Engine my way through the Spiral Abyss with these new Raiden teams, and also dust off my Eula since I left her in the dust back in 1.6. In my defense, goodbye.